Hello and welcome to Awaken and Rebuild, our new series on the book of Haggai. I am Rabbi Rafi Mallet, everybody's Rebbe. We have with us here in the studio Abigail, Colin, Lisa, Cliff, and Avi. And in the YouTube chat, we have Lizzie and also Liz, which I guess are two different people. Are you two different people, or are you the same person with two different accounts? And Ask Dr. D. Am I saying that correctly, or is it Ask Dr. Die? And we also have Tim Flanagan and Judaic Noahide. Thank you all for joining us. This series is brought to you by the Seattle Kollel, seattlekollel.com, seattlekollel.com, providing Jewish learning and programming for the Seattle Jewish community. Please consider visiting their website and offering a tax-deductible donation. Okay, Liz says she's the same person as Lizzie. So maybe you'll explain to us why you have there's like two different names showing. And in addition, if you'd like to support this channel, please become a channel member, like this video, share this video. And you can also support the channel by shopping at artscroll.com/Rebbi Rafi, REBBIRAFI. There are also links in the video description to donate directly to the channel if you would like to make a more meaningful contribution. Speaking of which, tonight's classes are dedicated for the following items. Number one, we'd like to express our condolences to Cliff Cohen, who is a very regular attendee of these classes. Cliff, who recently lost his mother, and we're going to dedicate tonight's class in memory of his mother, Leah Bat Avraham Visara. Also, the class is generously dedicated by Colin Martin for the speedy emotional recovery of the returned beloved hostages. And of course, that's great news that the living hostages were returned. We're still waiting for a number of the deceased hostages to be returned. And unfortunately, the fighting has already begun to resume, if you could say such a thing. Hamas has broken the ceasefire, has attacked IDF positions. The IDF has retaliated, and we don't know where this is going to go. The situation is very volatile, and we pray for peace and a speedy resolution to the situation. Also, class is generously dedicated by Nicholas Carlo for a refuah shlema for his son Michael, or Michael. Okay, someone mentioned there's an echo, but others are not hearing an echo. So let's assume that there isn't an echo. But Liz, maybe you need to check your audio equipment. Okay. Okay. Fine. Without further ado, I'm going to put the slides up on the screen. Let's see, what view should we go to over here? This one? This one. If someone would like to ask a question or make a comment, please unmute your mic, type into the YouTube chat. I will check the chat occasionally to address your comments and questions. There's also an option in YouTube to purchase what's called a super chat, which will highlight your chat comment. So I'll be sure to see it and address it if you want to do that. And it helps the channel as well. That's totally optional. Okay. Someone's making a comment. Abigail, go ahead.
I was just wondering why they had to have this restart. Why was there an 18-year lapse in the building of the second temple?
Okay, so you're addressing a question that presupposes something we haven't learned yet. So let's get there, all right? Awaken, Rebuild, a study of the book of Haggai. Okay, so chapter 1, Haggai is called to rebuild. Now here is verse 1. Hopefully you can see it. I know my head is kind of obscuring a little bit. I'll read the Hebrew. I put a translation alongside it. This translation is mostly from the JPS 1917, which I like a lot, but I modified it a bit to sound a little better, so it doesn't sound so King Jamesy. But here's the Hebrew. Bishnas Shitayim Lidaryovesh Hamelech Bachodesh Hashishi Biyom Echad Lachodesh Hayodivar Adonai Biyad Chagai Hanovi El Zerubbabel Ben Shealtiel Pachas Yehuda El Yehoshua Ben Yehotzadak HaKohen HaGadol Lemor. So it's a nice long verse. You can see the English over there, right? It says Bishnas Shetayim, in the second year, L'Daryavesh Hamelech, of the king Darius. Now we'll see which Darius this is. There are two Dariuses, okay? This is the second year of Darius. Which Darius is this? Give me a second. So it says Bachodesh Hashishi, in the 6th month. B'yom echad. So we're in the second year of Darius, in the 6th month of the second year of Darius. B'yom echad lachodesh, on the first day of the month. Hayod devar Hashem biyad Chagai hanavi literally means God's word was in the hand of Chagai the prophet, but it means that a prophecy was given to be communicated through him. El Zerubbabel ben Shealtiel, to a person named Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel. Now, he was not actually the son of Shealtiel, and I actually have a module of the Shir HaShirim series. Anyone who has not watched my Shir HaShirim series should do so as soon as possible. And I grant you that it's a long series. It's 73 episodes, whatever you want, installments. But you can take your time going through it. It's extremely worthwhile. The introduction to that class is more or less, Rashi tells us that Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, is like a songified version of the entire Tanakh. It is, so to speak, the love story between God and the Jewish people, but told through the actual historical events that we find in the Torah, in the prophets, and so on. But it's songified so that it's made into a poem where Israel is the female love interest and God is the male love interest. And so it really passes through just about all of Tanakh, and we touch on just about everything in that series. It's an overview of everything. And so one of the things that we talked about was, and if you look on the series playlist, it's called Love Song of Eternity on my playlists tab. It's near the end. It's not one of the first. It's closer to the end. There is a module called The Curse of Jeconia. Okay. So what we find is Zerubbabel was a descendant of one of the wicked kings of Judah. Now, what's the time period here? We are at the end of the exile, the end of the 70-year exile between the destruction of the first temple and the construction of the second temple, where when the first temple was destroyed, the Jews were carried away to Babylonia, and they returned, so to speak, after 70 years. It's a little more complicated than that, and that's what I hope to fill in. That's the information I hope to fill in this hour. Now, when they returned with a fellow named Zerubbabel, who was a descendant of Jeconia. Now, Jeconia in Hebrew is Yechonia, or also known as Yehoiachin, not to be confused with Yehoiakim, who was, I believe, his father, right? Either his father or his brother. Now I'm forgetting. But there were two kings. There was Yehoiachin and Yehoiakim. Yehoiakim was king before him. And after Yehoiakim was Yehoiachin, was also called Yechonia or Jeconia. Okay, now he was very bad. And he is cursed that, I believe it's in the book of Jeremiah, that his seed will not sit on the throne of David. Okay, now from his seed was Zerubbabel. Now, Zerubbabel is righteous, and he brings the Jews back. He brings, I should say, a portion of the Jews back to the land of Israel from Babylonia. And he's called here the son of Shealtiel. Now, he's definitely not the son of Shealtiel. But when we look in the, okay, why did I bring up the Song of Songs? Because I go through the curse of Jeconiah. I talk about Jeconiah and his descendants all the way till Zerubbabel in great length and depth. So what I'm going to say here in short form is fleshed out much more thoroughly there. I don't want to rehash everything there. But among his descendants is Zerubbabel. And if you look in the verses there in Chronicles, the Divrei Hayamim, Chronicles, you'll see that it's written in a confusing way, the descendants of Jeconiah up to Zerubbabel. What's clear is that Shealtiel is not his father. He's either his grandfather, which is the opinion of most commentaries, read it that way, that Shealtiel was his grandfather, and his father's name was Pedaiah. And he's named for Shealtiel, his grandfather, maybe because his grandfather was a more prominent person. So his grandfather's name is invoked because it had more name recognition. So it doesn't mean literally the son of Shealtiel, but rather descendant of Shealtiel from the family of Shealtiel. Another way of reading the verses in Chronicles is that Shealtiel was his uncle. Either way, Pedaiah is his father. The question is, Shealtiel Pedaiah's father or his brother? Unclear. If it was his uncle, Shealtiel, so then it's strange for him to be called son of. And so some of the commentaries offered that he was raised by Shealtiel, and therefore he's called son of, because again, member of his household, a member of his family. Okay, but either way, we cannot escape the fact that he is a descendant of Yechonia, or Yehoiachin, or Jeconiah, who's from the cursed lineage, okay? And here he's called Pachat Yehuda. Pachat means governor. He's the governor of Judah. Now, there were no kings reinstated at this time, but he was given some office of governance by the Persian Empire, over whom Darius is the emperor, okay? And so the word of Haggai is spoken to Zerubbabel, and then it says, Ve'el Yehoshua ben Yehotzadak, and to Yehoshua, Joshua, if you will, the son of Yehotzadak, HaKohen HaGadol, the high priest. Okay, Lamor saying, and then what follows will be what he said. But this is the background. This is taking place in the second year of Darius, the Persian emperor, and Haggai is speaking to Zerubbabel, the governor, and Yehoshua ben Yehotzadak, the high priest. Now, Abigail asked a question about why was there an 18-year gap. We're going to talk about the 18-year gap. But before I get there, I want to pause and ask, are there any questions on what I've said until this point?
Yeah, just clarifying the last bit. Is Yehoshua the high priest, or is Yehotzadak the high priest?
Yehoshua is the high priest. The great question. He is the son of Yehotzadak. Yehotzadak was the high priest before him. In fact, Yehotzadak was the high priest at the time of the exile when they were taken into captivity into Babylonia. Yehotzadak was the high priest, and Yehoshua is his son, who now presides over the new, or we'll see, there is no new temple, so to speak, but who will preside over the new temple. So it says the high priest of a what? If there's no temple, so we're going to talk about that. But in addition to that, let me just think, Yehotzadak and Ezra, if you heard of Ezra HaSofer, Ezra the scribe, were brothers. So Yehoshua is the nephew of Ezra, the famous Ezra that has a book named for him. Okay, this is his nephew. Yehoshua and Yehotzadak are brothers. Okay, excuse me, Yehotzadak and Ezra are brothers. Yehoshua is Ezra's nephew. Okay, any other questions on what I've said so far? Avi asks in the studio chat, is the 6 month not necessarily the 6th Jewish month? This is a great question, and I wondered about this myself. Are we talking about the 6th Jewish month, which is the month of Nisan, or are we talking about the 6th month of Darius's rule? Unclear, and I actually didn't see any commentaries that comment on it. I do recall vaguely, and I didn't look into it prior to the class, that in the Gemara and the Talmud in tractate Rosh Hashanah, there is a lot of discussion about this period of time, and the king's Rosh Hashanah, as you might know from the name, talks about the beginning of the year. So the whole, I want to say the whole, but there is a large amount of material in the tractate dedicated to which periods of the year are considered the beginning. The tractate begins with the words Arba'a Rosh Hashanim Haim. There are 4 Rosh Hashanahs. There are 4 beginnings of the year. People don't know this, that within one calendar year, we begin counting for different phenomenon from different times. So, for example, it says that Nisan, which is the month when the Jews left Egypt, and God says, this shall be for you the first of months. We count that as the first of months in the count of holidays, such that Passover is considered the first festival, and then Shavuot the second festival, and so on. And Sukkot is actually, in a certain way, the last festival of the Torah, and then Hanukkah and Purim, which follow, are rabbinically ordained festivals. That's a whole other topic. But it says it's also the way we count month. We also count months of a Jewish king from the month of Nisan. So when there's a king over Israel, when do we say it's the first year of his rule, the second year of his rule? We go by Nisan. Every time Nisan rolls around, it's the next year. So the Gemara says, for example, that if the king would be anointed the last day of Adar, which is the month before Nisan, and he's a king for one day, and then it rolls around to the month of Nisan, that's considered now his second year. And this may become relevant depending which commentaries we look at now, but the one day that he reigned prior to Nisan is considered his first year of reign, and then from the first of Nisan onwards is now his second year of reign. We roll the years of kings from Nisan. Now we celebrate the holiday of Rosh Hashanah in the Jewish month of Tishrei, and this is actually years that count from the creation, and years that it says also that count for certain other phenomenon. For example, we have like Shemitah, right? The sabbatical year is reckoned from Tishrei. That begins the sabbatical year, and so on, and the cycle of the sabbatical years, and many of the tithes, not all of the tithes. But significantly, it says we count years of non-Jewish kings from Tishrei. Okay, so just like we do with Nisan for Jewish kings, we count for Tishrei for non-Jewish kings. So it's like Tishrei, that Rosh Hashanah is the creation of the world, so it's sort of the universal beginning of the year. But since the Jews left Egypt in Nisan, that's the beginning of the year for Jews. So it's like Rosh Hashanah that we celebrate in Tishrei is really for the whole world. And Nisan is particular for the Jewish people. And famously, Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of the month of Shvat, is the new year for the trees, which means we begin calculating the tithes of fruit that grows from trees based on the crop that it yields from Tu B'Shvat of one year until the next year. We look at that crop and we tithe it, right? So we reckon the calculation of tithes for trees from Tu B'Shvat. That's what it means, that it's the new year for the trees, for those who are familiar with that Jewish holiday. And then the first day of Elul is also a new year for one of the tithes. So different tithes have different seasons, and so they have different days that are considered their new year. Now, why am I saying all this? Because Avi's asking, the 6 months to what year are we counting over here? Now, based on what I told you, if any of you were paying attention, I would ask you, what do you think? It says the 6th month, and it's talking about years in the second year of Darius. So 6 months from when? Which calculation of months do you think this is?
Nisan.
Who said Nisan? Colin says Nisan. Why do you say Nisan?
No, I said Tishrei.
Oh, Colin said Tishrei. Someone said Nisan. I heard Nisan.
It was Cliff.
Cliff, I thought it was your voice. Cliff, why do you say Nisan?
Because I think you just mentioned, unless I misheard, that that's how they count the years of the reigns of monarchs, basically.
Well, we differentiate between two kinds of monarchs.
Uh-huh.
Jewish kings and non-Jewish kings.
Okay. So
Jewish
probably
kings
messed
are
that
from
one up.
Nisan and non-Jewish kings are from Tishrei.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So what do you say now?
Well, Tishrei.
We'll see about that. Now, by the way, I don't know the answer, but we'll see that it's not so easy to decide. And again, like I said, the Talmud in Rosh Hashanah does talk a lot about the Persian kings and the way the dates are calculated here. But I don't remember what it says, to be honest. I haven't looked at it in a while, and I don't remember. So, good question. Okay, so we're in the second year, 6th month of Darius. Now, we need to set up a lot more. So let me go to the next slide. Who is Darius? Now, there's a Rashi here, and you'll see the Rashi. I have it translated. I'm questioning whether to look at this Rashi. Why? Because Rashi brings up some portions of Ezra that I made slides out of, and his commentary there is a bit longer. He talks a bit more about the history there, and so the question is, maybe it's more worthwhile to see that Rashi. And then he takes us to Ezra chapter 4, and he has some more comments over there. Here's a little timeline. And then the Radak kind of he gets it all in a relatively brief comment. There's just no English translation for it. So I think my instinct tells me to go first to the Radak because it's maybe the simplest, but you'll see it's not simple at all. We're going to need that timeline I showed you to understand who Darius was and what's the period of time we're talking about. I've been having anxiety about how to communicate this because it's so complicated that I'm not sure that even my communication skills are up to the task, but we're going to try. So be patient with me as I try to get the words out. Now, Radak comments on here where it says the second year of Darius. He says, this is Darius, the son of Achashverosh. If you see that here, Hu Daryavesh ben Achashverosh. He's the son of Achashverosh. Now, for you Tanakh experts out there, who was Achashverosh? Okay, somebody speak up.
The Purim story.
Yeah, sorry. The
No,
guy
I'm
with
wrong.
Esther. The guy with Esther.
The guy with Esther, the Purim story. The king of Persia in the Purim story is Achashverosh. Now, this is his son. So, someone mentioned Esther. If Achashverosh is the father, who then is the mother? Not that.
Are you saying Esther?
It is Esther. It is Esther. It says Va'amru, and they said, when the Radak says they said, he means the sages, the Talmudic sages said, that means we have an oral tradition, Kiven Esther Haya, that he was the son of Esther. And this, you could find this passage in the Midrash Rabbah, in Vayikra Rabbah. That's the Midrash Rabbah on the book of Vayikra, Leviticus, in chapter 13, section 5. You'll find this statement. And what's really nice about that is that you'll see there's no citation. I copied and pasted this from Safaria. There's no citation here. Rashi says the same exact thing, and there's no citation. I went to my bookshelf and I pulled off the shelf this volume of the book of Treyasar. Okay. It's upside down. Sorry. This book of Treyasar. Okay, Treyasar is the so-called 12 prophets, where the book of Haggai is in here. Okay. And I wanted to see if there was a citation in Rashi's commentary here so I could look it up. Okay. So I'll show you something really funny. Here in Haggai, in chapter 1, verse 1, okay, looks like this, okay? So right here in Rashi, can't really see it. Can I get it up to the camera? I don't know if you can see so well. There is a citation in Rashi where it says, Rashi says he tells us it's in Vayikra Rabbah. He tells us it says it's in Vayikra Rabbah, but he doesn't say where. So the printed edition has in parentheses the letters Yud Gimel, which means 13. So you figure it's in Vayikra Rabbah chapter 13. Now it's a big chapter. The chapter's broken up into smaller sections. So I'm like, that's like going to be hard to look through all that. So in my book, again, it's very hard for you to see, I'm sure. But in my book, I made some notes. And I don't know when I made these notes, but it must have been many years ago. Many years ago, I made notes. So I put a little note in the book, which I found today when I looked at it, that says Vayikra Rabbah, chapter 13, section 5. So I wrote this in for myself many years ago, and it saved me time today when I looked at it. I was like, hey, I wrote myself a note. Thanks, myself. I was sitting there like, thanks, self. That was really helpful. So I looked it up, and lo and behold, it's there. But I'm not gonna drag you into that. I just thought that was a cute anecdote. That's why I know where it is, because I made myself a note in my book many years ago, and I looked at it today, and I was just like, thanks, self. Anyway, so he says, okay, it says he's the son of Esther, and he commanded to build the temple. V'hutziva livnos habayis. Oh, you know what this reminds me? I want my laser pointer. Let's go to the laser pointer. Okay. Here, he commanded to build the temple after the enemies of Judah had bitlu abinyan. That means they halted the construction. What was that about? It's Mitrilas Malchus Achashverosh, at the beginning of the kingdom of Achashverosh, when Achashverosh became king. So I'm going to give you some background now. When the Jews began returning to the land of Israel prior to this, when did they begin returning to the land of Israel? Now that I brought it up, maybe I will actually go back a little bit. If we look at Ezra, which Rashi cites over here, chapter 1, verse 1, you see in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, this is the very beginning of the book of Ezra, at the end of the word of Hashem from the mouth of Jeremiah. Now, what does that mean? There was a prophecy by Jeremiah in chapter 29, verse 10, where he says that I'm going to bring you back after 70 years. Now, he doesn't say 70 years from what? And meanwhile, there's a parallel prophecy in Daniel chapter 9 that says that the temple will be rebuilt after 70 years. And so there was a thought, an understanding that these were the same 70 years that were being referred to. So the prophecy of Jeremiah that God would return the Jews from Babylonia after 70 years, this is fulfilled in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia. God, it says, Hashem aroused the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, and he announced throughout his kingdom, as well as in writing, saying, verse 2, thus said Cyrus, king of Persia, Hashem, God of the heavens, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, right? Cyrus ruled over very many lands. And he has commanded me to build for him a house, that should say in Jerusalem that is in Judah. I wrote this translation I wrote myself, so I made a little typo here. He commanded me to build for him a house in Jerusalem that is in Judah. Okay. Now, just an anecdote. God aroused me. Like, did God speak to him? Was he a prophet? What is Cyrus talking about? Now, we know in the book of Isaiah, Cyrus is called my anointed one, Mashiach. Cyrus is called Mashiach. Hashem calls him my anointed because, number one, he was anointed. He was a king. And God, through Isaiah, prophesied that God would choose Cyrus to be the vehicle of the Jews' redemption. Now, how aware was this of Cyrus? How much was he divinely inspired? This was a pagan guy. Very difficult to understand that he had some kind of a prophecy. So the truth is that this passage came under a lot of criticism from secular critics, saying that there's no way this story is true because King Cyrus was a pagan and he never would have said something like this, right? Of course, a secular person would say that. Now, the amazing thing is that, archaeology always slaps these people in the face, because the more we uncover, the more we find corroborating the Tanakh. And so they were uncovered writings of Cyrus that where he wrote that he remember that Cyrus ruled over many conquered peoples, because the Babylonians exiled many people, the Assyrians exiled many people, and Persia eventually conquered these empires. So he's reigning over this people, and his policy was a very benevolent king, was to allow the exiled peoples to return to their lands and rebuild, and this was a way of gaining their loyalty. So we find letters from Cyrus where he writes this about many peoples in the names of their gods. We don't have archaeology for this specific pronouncement of Cyrus about Hashem, but we do find it for other nations where he says, the God of this nation has aroused me to, send them to their land and rebuild, etc. And so we find through the archaeology that this was exactly the way that Cyrus spoke. Right? Ezra records when he does it for the Jewish people. He was a politician. He was a very savvy politician. So that's what he says. He says the Jews should go back. Who among you from all his nation, may his God be with him, shall ascend to Jerusalem that is in Judah and build the house of Hashem, God of Israel. He is the God that is in Jerusalem, right? So he's telling you, you guys, anybody who wants to go can go rebuild. Now, I have to get this straight in terms of the timeline. So we have Cyrus. Cyrus rules for under 3 years. Now, I don't want to get this wrong, so I want to see if I could go back to the Radak. I think he goes through it pretty thoroughly. Okay. All right. So just to give some background to what the Radak is saying of. So Cyrus sends the Jews back. After Cyrus reigns over Persia, Achashverosh. Okay, Achashverosh comes next. Now, everything I'm telling you is in the chronology of the Tanakh. If you read Herodotus, you're going to find something different. But the question is, whose account of history do we trust? That of the Jewish prophets, or that of a Greek historian who lived hundreds of years later, who traveled around to many different provinces where they had no emails, no texting, no telephones, no social media, and he gets 10 different stories about 10 different kings, and he writes a whole 200-year history of Persia where we have like 70 years in our book. And that's why people wonder. I'm going to bring up a big big problem right now, is that the chronology, the secular chronology of the Persian history, which is based mainly on Herodotus, who was, they call the father of historians. He wrote really the first history book. He was a Greek that wrote the Persian Wars, and he goes through Persian history. But these are based on oral traditions. He's the first historian. He's walking around asking people the history of their places. They have to remember back hundreds of years. Everybody has a different story, and he cobbles this together into a 200-year history of like 10 different Persian kings. In the Tanakh, there's 4. Now, so how do we account for the difference? Well, kind of like we said, you could have different accounts from different peoples that conflict with each other, and Herodotus interprets it as different kings. You could have governors of small states. Think about, I hate to invoke it, but like Monty Python, right? When King Arthur is he's going through Britain, and he says, I am Arthur, king of the Britons. Like, king of the who? And he's like, king of the Britons. Well, who are they? We're all Britons. He goes, well, I didn't vote for you. Meaning, as funny as it is, there's a certain accuracy to the fact that people didn't know where they were, who was their king, what country. They knew like their local governor, and that's about it. People didn't know world geography and politics. They were ignorant. So you're going to have a local governor. People are going to think he's the king. They're going to tell Herodotus, oh, this is our king. He's going to write a whole story that the guy was the king of Persia. In other words, Herodotus, he did a heroic job, but I think we can we can be very skeptical of his account of history. So I'm only bringing that subject because a lot of people point out that there's a huge discrepancy between the Jewish tradition of these events and secular history, which adds another 160 years of Persian history, and which we Jews don't have. So am I worried about that? No, I'm not worried about that, because we have a history that was written concurrent with when it was happening, and it's very reliable. But the secular bias wants to throw out the Bible, so they dismiss it. There was an excellent article on this topic. It's called Fixing the History Books. You could search it on Google. It's written by a fellow named Brad Aronson. So if you look up an article, Fixing the History Books by Brad Aronson, you will find a really nice, concise summary of a defense of the Jewish chronology against the secular chronology, based on a longer book, which I don't know the name of it, by an Israeli scholar named Chaim Chayfetz, and that's in Hebrew, so I don't know how many of you will have access to it. I have a friend who read the whole book, but Chaim Chayfetz wrote a whole book on the subject. Brad Aronson summarizes it in an article called Fixing the History Books. I find it persuasive, but I'm going to go according to the Tanakh's chronology here. Anyway, so going back to this whole, I told you it's a lot to get through, the historical background over here. Okay, so Cyrus sends them back. Achashverosh rules next. During his rule, we have the events of the books of Nehemiah and Ezra, where the local population of the land of Israel, sound familiar? When the Jews return, they're not so happy about it. And again, these are like the Samaritans, right? The people that replaced the Jews in Israel when they left, and the Assyrians brought in a replacement population from outside. These guys are not happy that the Jews are coming back. So they send word to Achashverosh, hey, the Jews are rebuilding their temple and their Jerusalem. Well, of course they are. Cyrus told them to. He said, but don't you know what happened the last time? They rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar, which is true. And they're going to rebel against you too. Don't let the Jews rebuild. So Achashverosh has the building halted. Now, there's so much information that I just can't get to, but that's what he's talking about here, that the Tzarei Yehuda, the enemies of Judah, mitchilas malchus Achashverosh, from the beginning of the kingdom of Achashverosh, meaning they knew they couldn't stop Cyrus because Cyrus wanted the Jews to rebuild. But once he had Cyrus gone, they said, now we can get in with the next guy. This is very scary and very relevant for current politics. As much as the current administration of any country might love Israel, the next guy that gets in there obviously may not. There's too much to say on that topic to go into right now, but you can make your own judgments. Now, so that's what they do. They complain to Achashverosh, and he halts the construction. Now, why? Okay. He says, because when they came out of the exile, it was not yet 70 years from the destruction of the temple. Now, let me just repeat what I said before. Jeremiah prophesied that the Jews would return after 70 years of exile. That came true when Cyrus said after 70 years, hey guys, go back. Okay, that was the fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy. But there is a parallel prophecy in the book of Daniel that the temple will be rebuilt after 70 years. So people thought that this was going to be at the same time. And that was a mistake. It's a mistake that was fatal for a number of people. So the temple building was halted. But as a matter of fact, says Radak, it was halted because the 70 years of Daniel's prophecy had not been fulfilled, because Daniel's prophecy was meant to be understood that not from the exile until 70 years would be the temple rebuilt, but from the destruction of the temple till the construction would be 70 years. And that happened in stages. So Abigail asked about 18 years. So here's how it goes. Let's look at the timeline. In 442 BCE, now this is according to the Jewish reckoning of the years. Many people will be familiar with the first temple being destroyed in 586 BC. Most people think, oh, when was the temple destroyed? All the history books say 586 BC. We reject that number. We say 423. That's 160 years later. Too bad on you. We don't care. That's what it is. Okay. But let's go back 20 years. And Jerusalem is conquered by Babylonia. And Jehoiakim is exiled to Babylonia by Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. Pay attention. What happens next? So that was the first stage of the exile. Now look at 434. It's 8 years later. Jerusalem is conquered again because Jeconiah rebels against Nebuchadnezzar. He's captured and exiled. So there's a second exile that happens in 434. And then there's the siege of Jerusalem. About 10 years later, the walls of Jerusalem are breached. The temple is destroyed in 423 BCE. Now, I'll say these years are approximate. Not everyone has exactly these numbers. But here's the point. If you look at the difference in years from 442, when the first exile, so to speak, takes place, that is the exile of Jehoiakim, the father of Jeconiah, till here it looks like 19 years, but you could call it 18 years because these are not exact year to date, right? It's within the year. So they return 70 years after this date is when Jeremiah said they would return. That's when here Zerubbabel led the return to the land of Israel. I didn't make this timeline. It's from Chabad.org. Zerubbabel led the return to the land of Israel in 371. That doesn't really comport, does it? BCE? Yeah, it does, because we're doing minus. So if you take away 70 years, or add 7 years, whatever you want to call it, right? So from 42, it's still not 71, right? Is it? 442. Yeah, it is. It is, because if you take away 40 years from this century, and then 30 years from this century, you get 70, yeah? So, and again, if it's off by a year, we're not talking about exact year to date, but within a year, okay? So around this time, and again, these dates could be disputed, give or take. This is a give or take. But 70 years after this exile, this first stage of the exile, Jehoiakim, we have Zerubbabel comes back. He begins the return. So that is Jeremiah's prophecy. But remember, 18 years after Jehoiakim was exiled, the first temple was destroyed. Oh, you can't really see, my head's blocking it, isn't it? You can see it mostly. Okay, fine. So therefore, here, Zerubbabel comes back, and then 18 years later, the second base Hamikdash, and around 350, right? There's around 370, there's around 71, 49. You have 18 years later, the second temple is completed. 70 years after the destruction of the first temple. So those are the two prophecies of 70 years. The one in Jeremiah and the one in Daniel. The one in Jeremiah is from the time Jehoiakim is exiled until the time Zerubbabel returns is 70 years. There's 18 years between when Jehoiakim is exiled and when the first temple is destroyed. And therefore, there's likewise 18 years from the time Zerubbabel returns till the time the second temple is completed. And again, just to state that in other words, therefore, the second temple is completed 70 years after the first temple is destroyed. Whew! Is that clear? Did I make that clear? Avigal, you be the judge. Did I make that clear?
Yes, you did. It took me a little bit to keep up with you, but yes, thank you.
Okay, I hope I made that clear. 2 70-year prophecies, 2 periods of 70 years. 70 years from when they leave till when they come back. 70 years from when the temple's destroyed till it is rebuilt. Now, just again, you say that they left 18 years before the temple was destroyed. They didn't all leave. A portion of the Jews were exiled at that time, and another portion was exiled 8 years later, 9 years later, whatever it is, and another portion of the Jews are finally exiled with the temple's destruction. And by the way, even then, a portion remained. I don't have it on this timeline, but in between, like 370 over here and 423 over here, I cut out stuff. But that's where you have Gedaliah. People know about the fast of Gedaliah. He was appointed governor by the Babylonians over the Jews. He was assassinated. The Babylonians slaughtered and exiled the Jews further. There were many stages in the exile, but this is the main point. 70 years from the first stage of exile till the first stage of return. 70 years from the destruction to the construction. Okay, so now we go back to Radak, who's giving us this overview. Blah, blah, blah. So much information. Oh, I went the wrong way. There's so much information that I'm skipping because I have to. But I think I'm going to give you the main gist of it. Okay. Okay, so that's what he said. Why was it halted by Achashverosh? The real reason was, says the Radak, because it wasn't yet 70 years from the time the temple was destroyed. That prophecy wasn't meant to be fulfilled. But people thought so. And because they thought so, they thought this prophecy had been annulled. Okay? And that becomes very important now. They thought that the two periods of 70 years that Jeremiah spoke about and Daniel spoke about were the same. And when the construction was halted, they thought the prophecy was annulled and there would not be a reconstruction, that they didn't merit it, which might be true anyway, but God still would fulfill his word and they could forget about it. Okay. It had only been 52 years when they returned. When they returned with Zerubbabel, it had only been 52 years from the destruction. Okay. And then he goes through a whole calculation. I don't know if you want to hear the whole calculation. It was in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar that they were exiled. And Cyrus was only king for 3 years, but they weren't 3 complete years. Like we said before, you could have a part of a year leading into the next year, and that first part of the year is counted as one, even though it's a partial year. Then you have a whole next year, and then part of the next year is counted as well. So it's counted as 3 years, but it could be only 1.5, 2 years, whatever it is. He's trying to fill in the gap of the extra years. He shows you, he does the math to show you how it all fills in. We don't need to go through it because we don't really have time. But okay, so the point is, he says that it was in the beginning of Achashverosh's reign that they nullified the building, they halted the building, and it did not proceed again until now, the 2nd year of Darius. Okay, he says, then in the 2nd year of Darius, it was now 70 years from the destruction of the first temple, and therefore the time that the second temple was prophesied to be rebuilt. Okay, he makes a calculation. He does the math. I just don't have time to go through the math with you. If you have any questions, you could always ask me to clarify later, after, next time. Yeah. Okay. So, therefore, now at the end of 70 years, the prophecy comes to Haggai, who was living in Jerusalem. He says, "La'orer Zerubbabel," to arouse Zerubbabel, livnos habayis, to build the temple. Ki hayu misatzlim, because the people had grown lazy. Mipnei hasonim, because of the enemies. That's a harsh word, misatzlim, but it means they had essentially dropped the matter of rebuilding the temple because of the enemies that they had in the land. And the enemies had halted the construction for all these years. And the divine spirit did not arouse them until now, because the time had not yet come, because it was not 70 years yet from the destruction until now. Okay, fine. So that is a little bit the historical background of how we get to our verse in Haggai, where it is the 2nd year, right? Going back. where we started here. Okay, where it's the second year of Darius the king. Who's Darius the king? He's the son of Achashverosh and Esther. In his second year is the end of 70 years from the destruction of the first temple. Abigail asked, why was there an 18-year gap between when Zerubbabel returned from Babylonia with the exiles until the second year of Darius? There was an 18-year gap because that was 70 years from the first stage of exile, and that was the fulfillment of the prophecy of Jeremiah. But it was still only 52 years from the destruction of the first temple, and another 18 years had to be waited until the second temple would be rebuilt. And that is now, and that is where Haggai begins. So hopefully what I've done for you in this hour is I've set the stage for where we begin the book of Haggai historically, exactly where we are in history, in Tanakh, in terms of the context of the other prophecies, and therefore where and when the book of Haggai begins with his prophecy, as I titled chapter 1, Haggai's call to rebuild. Why does Haggai's call to rebuild come now? That's what we just covered in the past hour. So I hope it was clear. If it wasn't clear, go back and watch it again till you have it clear. But next week we'll pick up, with verse number 2, and we'll see the brilliant rebuke of Haggai, what he said to the people then, and what we can hear for ourselves today. Okay, any questions or comments before I end the class?
Thank you. Very interesting.
I hope
it's interesting.
Was Rabbi, when Cyrus sent the people back to rebuild, not a whole lot of them went back, did they? So were more people coming back in dribs and drabs, or was there another load of people who came back to Israel because of Haggai?
I think there were stages, because we had Zerubbabel, we had Nehemiah, we had Ezra. There were certain luminaries at this time. Now the question is, was Nehemiah and Zerubbabel the same person? I'm not prepared to deal with that right now. Maybe some of the commentators entertain that. But we have different luminaries of the Jewish people who are returning from Babylonian exile, bringing with them waves of returnees. Likely there were other groups and individuals who trickled in over the course of time. However, the main point to answer your question is that the minority of Jews returned from Babylonia, and this was a fatal mistake on the part of the Jewish people, that only about 20% of the exiles returned, and that's only the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. Of course, the 10 tribes did not return. And we'll see, actually, now you remind me, I did also put in the slides the commentary of Malbim, which we didn't get to. We just set up the historical context, but Malbim has some choice words about this phenomenon. So I guess we'll talk more about that next week, of the mistakes and the failings of this generation of Jews and what it led to. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now,
Thank you, Rabbi.
as I'm fond of saying, like I said, they said about the Arizal, the great mystic, that when he would teach, he was Megala Tefach, he was revealing a hand's breadth, Umachas Alpayim Ama, and he was covering 2,000 cubits. For every tefach, for every hand's breadth of information he shared, there were 2,000 cubits that he was not sharing. I'm not on purpose doing that, but this is such a gigantic topic, and there's so much information behind it that I really could only share with you in this hour a comparative hand's breadth compared to 2,000 cubits that I just had to gloss over. So I'd love to share more. We'll see how it may come up in the following classes. I'll be able to hopefully share more and sprinkle in some more of the background information that is really quite phenomenal.
Was Darius, which Darius fell to?
Oh, which Darius? Good. So what I did not tell you is, prior to Cyrus was Darius the Mede. Okay. Now it goes like I'll quickly go through the timeline. Nebuchadnezzar, I can't do the years right now without looking at a chart, but Nebuchadnezzar, he destroys the temple. He carries the Jews into Babylonian captivity. After him, there rules a ruler named Evil Merodach, who, like in English, it's Evil, Evil Merodach, right? Evil in Hebrew is Evil Merodach. He was not Nebuchadnezzar's son, but after Evil Merodach, Nebuchadnezzar's son comes to power. His name is Belshazzar, okay? Belshazzar is the famous guy with the writing on the wall in the book of Daniel, and he is killed immediately by Darius the Mede. The Medes come and conquer Babylonia that night of the banquet of Belshazzar, where they all get drunk and they see the writing on the wall, and Daniel interprets it for them. And that's where the phrase "the writing on the wall" comes from. And Belshazzar is immediately executed, and the empire is conquered by the Medes, Darius the Mede. Now, Darius the Mede is followed by Cyrus, because Media and Persia were like concurrent allied empires, and Persia kind of absorbed Media and Babylonia. So following Darius the Mede, you have Cyrus, and following Cyrus, you have Achashverosh. Following Achashverosh is Darius the Persian, Darius II. Okay, and that's where our story begins.
And was he the one that fell to Alexander of Macedonia? Was it
Yes.
one of the Dariuses?
Yes. Yes. And he was Jewish because he was Esther's son. Although the truth is, we could argue whether he was Jewish or not. Even though he was Esther's son, there's some question whether, I know I'm going to get myself into hot water right now. There's some question whether Jewish lineage was matrilineal or patrilineal at that period of time. I'll let you argue it out amongst yourselves, but I would say that it is conceivable that he was not considered Jewish. And the whole question we started with of the 6 months, is it 6 months of a Jewish king or 6 months of a non-Jewish king? Now that I revealed to you that he might have been Jewish, that question gets reopened, right? But even if he was Jewish, he was not a king of the Jews. He was a king of the Persians. So most likely is that these are 6 months of a non-Jewish king. But like I said, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah discusses it, and I don't remember what it says there. So I don't want to say anything definitive. But now I got to go.
Thank you.
All righty. So
Thank you.
everyone
Thank
have
you,
a good
Rabbi.
week. Have a good week, and I will see you next time.
See you all
Thank-
next time.
Good night.